I'm Rob Young, and I'm your co-host along with Michael MacBride. And today we have a stellar panel to talk about the subject of what we steal from other media. What, as writers, what do we gently borrow uh, from TV, movies, etc. So with us today, from left to right, Christopher Vallon. Christopher is I can say a veteran writer, crime writer, mostly known for his John Santana detective series. Lives part-time in Arizona, part-time in Minnesota. Most recent novel, what's your most recent one?
Well, Shadow Falls, but the new one comes out tomorrow, Every Broken Thing.
Oh,
So,
well, yay. Hey,
Congrats.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
congrats.
congratulations.
it's a book release party. Who knew?
Yes,
Happy book
yes,
day.
So
Where's the
exactly.
wine?
welcome,
Yeah.
Chris. And in the center spotlight is Tracy Lambrecht, who writes as PJ Tracy. Tracy, welcome. She has written so many books, I don't even know where to start. Mostly known or first known for the Monkey Wrench series that she wrote with her mother, um, and then branched out after mother passed to write the what's Margaret Nolan. I couldn't think of Margaret's first name there for a minute. But most recently, you've gone back to the Monkey Wrench series and released the deepest cut.
Yes, in
Yeah.
September.
So welcome, Tracy.
Thank
Happy to have
you.
you.
Thank you, guys.
And last but certainly not least, James Bennett. James, welcome. Uh,
Thank you.
Most recent book called Catechism, and which is taken sort of out of the front pages of the newspaper, I think. Um, but so welcome to you all, and welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Yeah, so like Rob said, thank you for the warm introductions. But yeah, we're interested in things that we steal. And I guess, it's one of those kind of old standby kind of tropes or jokes, I guess, about how writers are thieves and we lovingly steal from things. And in fact, like, T.S. Eliot often is attributed to saying writers have always been thieves. Good writers borrow, great writers steal. I think it was Nina Bodden, who did like Carrie's War, who said all writers are thieves, theft is a necessary tool to trade. And Richard Russo, Empire Falls, said something like every writer reads with larceny in their heart, which I kind of love. Um, but I'm wondering specifically, like, what kind of techniques from television, movies, music, or video games, maybe even, who knows, that have made their way into your storytelling. And just to kind of get started, we'll just do the roundtable thing. So, um, Christopher Fallon, if you'd start us off, that'd be wonderful. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, when I think about the Santana novels and the historical novel I wrote with City of Stones about 1950 Minneapolis, I look at my books, they all start with the murder or the body. So that's sort of like the television cold open before the credits roll, the opening credits, when something happens. And I think that since they're technically police procedurals, you've got to work the case with Santana. You got to figure it out as he works it. So I think that finding the body and coming in for the reader gives that story sort of velocity or forward momentum because they want to find out what happened and obviously who did it. So that's sort of like the cold open, maybe on a television series. Um, I would also say the anti-hero. You take a lot of that from movies or television. Santana's not a perfect character. I think years ago in television, the 30-minute or the 45-minute TV detective, was pretty much black and white. There weren't a lot of character flaws or whatever. And that's not the case with Santana. He has his whole backstory and his demons. Born in Colombia, and he carries that background. And some of the books in the new book, Every Broken Thing, takes place mostly in Colombia. So I think that piece about the anti-hero is and the flawed hero is pretty prevalent today in books. I would think the long arc, most of the old shows were like 45 minutes or half hour again, like I said, and they were over hour at the most. But now you see with Netflix or you see with Amazon, like Bosch and those series, there's that long arc. And I think in a detective series, Every Broken Thing, that's the 11th book in the series. So throughout that, the crime begins and ends, but the character carries all that baggage and all what happened, the emotional scars or whatever throughout the books and the chapters. I would think the only other thing I can think of right off the top of my head is the cliffhanger, that you see on TV or at the end of a next Netflix episode or whatever. I would see at the end of a chapter, you want to leave the reader hanging there, so they want to get into the next chapter.
Sure.
So those are a few of the things I think that you see in TV or movies or media. And I'm a very visual learner or a very visual person. So for me, framing a scene and seeing a scene through my eyes is very much, like I say, from a visual or from a TV or movie perspective, I think.
What about you, Tracy? What are some things you've lifted from the other mediums? And I know because we've kind of talked before, you've done some screenwriting as well. So like I think it's kind of embedded in you, but talk a bit about how that shows up in your fiction.
Yeah, it is. I'm a heavy borrower. I generally love everything, but I have to say that absolutely film has been, you know, the greatest influence in my fiction writing for sure. Like Christopher, I am a very visual person, and from the time I was little, I mean, I was like writing stories when I was like 4 and 5, and even back then, I didn't see words on page. I didn't see them in my head. I saw film. I saw a movie. I was always a movie buff. And so I, I write with that in mind. And with screenwriting background, you learn some really important things. In a screenplay, you have 120 pages, period. That's it, right? So what I did learn was you need maximum economy with maximum impact. And as an old mentor of mine told me many, many years ago, he said, Tracy, every studio has what they call then the no girl, no girls and boys. And their only job was to say no, because they get this tremendous volume of scripts in, every single day. He said, you make sure, the way to stand out is you make sure that when the reader gets to the end of the first page, they can't not turn it. And so that's kind of the way that, I visualize my books. And, that's so much about pacing and it's about the beats. Another thing that's really, really huge is dialogue. Your dialogue has to be snappy, it has to be authentic, and there's nothing like, film or television to get that, you get the cadence, you get the nuance. And just because of my background, I'm very mindful of dialogue, and it's one of the most important components to a book, make it flow. And certainly, I studied dialogue. When I was writing with my mother, it was great because we had the dialogues, we spoke the dialogue, so that was our writing. Now I just talk to myself. Nothing new, of course.
You ever get into an argument?
With yourself.
Mother?
No,
Never.
when you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, all the time. And in fact, before I signed on, I was in a huge fight with myself. I won't reveal about what, but
Fair enough. James, what about you? What are some things you lift from the different mediums like that for your writing?
Um, Christopher and Tracy really hit the primary things. I think we are in a media saturated world, and so everything that comes in to us from all sorts of media influence our writing. And I, like Christopher, I'm a very visual learner, very visual person. And I'm always thinking in terms of scenes and constructing scenes, which is a little different than I think maybe writing was, say 50 or 100 years ago, where the narrative took a different track instead of just trying to capture um, the reader's imagination through some sort of specific concrete setup between characters or settings, which is also important. Um, I think to differentiate myself a little bit, I'd say a lot, especially in my um last book, Catechisms, since I had several strong storylines going in it, I created when my mind was very much uh, followed almost a screenplay in the fact that it jumps from one storyline to another, almost not quite as complicated, but almost you could envision it like the way 20 the TV series 24 used to do things, and you'd have three or four storylines going on at once in the screen. While in that book, in a chapter, I could easily have two or three storylines going on at once, and the nice thing about that, and what cinema and television bring to it, is that you can jump from one point of view to another very quickly, but still interconnect them, still get them to relate back to each other. Um, so beyond that, I'm not sure. Um, I have one interesting thing I'll say also is that I've toyed with, and I don't think I've come up with any solution to just how to um, incorporate memorable pieces of music, whether it's pop music or classical music, in the narrative in some way to help carry it forward. Um, I think that's kind of fascinating, and of course, we're all, as I said, media saturated world. Everything we see now it's not, well, I should say it's not just all visual, because anything you watch, there's also music going on in the background,
Yeah,
which is
definitely.
building that. If you want to build tension, you've got to have tense music in the background. Um,
Right.
so,
Look at Psycho, right? I mean,
right, exactly.
soundtracks are hugely important.
Yes,
Yeah.
soundtrack. I think of like the Lord of the Rings, which really does the same thing on a grand
Right.
scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So how do
So I
you
think,
how do
yeah,
you
we're all
accomplish
thieves.
that? Yeah, how do you accomplish that on the written page? How do you accomplish the background music, the building of the tension? I mean,
Well, I'll,
I
I'll
haven't
jump
I
in.
haven't figured it out yet.
I'll jump in on that because I'm also a musician, and what I'm saying, I always see my books as a film. I always have a soundtrack in my head. Now, although I've never really found maybe the way to, or even the reason for really incorporating music, throughout a book, unless it is about music and a musician. But the one, I have the soundtrack in my head, but the one really useful thing about music in narrative, in fiction, is I use it as a texture and I use it as context. It's kind of an additional flourish. For instance, it helps. flesh out and develop the character without using any words. Because, okay, say you have two characters, and at one juncture in the book, one is listening to a Dead Kennedy song. Okay, you know a lot about that character without ever saying anything. And on the other side, the other character is having coffee while he listens to the overture to Tannhäuser. So you know about his character. And it's just, I always think it was kind of a little cheat.
Almost a shortcut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, who doesn't like shortcuts?
Yeah. Well, Christopher, you were
Yeah.
going to say something. Sorry.
Well, I know. I to go along with what Tracy said. Yeah, Santana listens to music, but it's Colombian artists a lot, Shakira, that kind of thing, and so he'll be listening to music maybe while he's thinking about something or contemplating, or he goes home after work, and so that's how I kind of get it into the book. Is just mentioning the artist and the songs he's listening to, or something along those lines. But I like what Tracy was saying about character too, because what they listen to oftentimes tells you a lot about who they are, and to put those in. Most of I would say probably 85-90% of the books that I write are primarily through Santana's point of view. There's in the first book, White Tombs, Angelina Torres describes her coming across the border with the coyotes being, and I think The Price of Life was told through multiple points of view, mostly Santana. But so it's harder to get those kinds of thoughts and feelings in when it's primarily through one point of view. However, if Santana comes into a scene, somebody's listening to some kind of music or something, again, you can get some idea of their characteristics through that. So, but yeah, I remember reading, I think Stephen King listens to heavy metal. He writes. He's got his office in the back, where he goes and and does his work, and he's got that thing blasting away while he's writing. I couldn't do that.
Very
I like
appropriate.
something a little softer, or
Yeah.
more relaxing. But I can see that from King.
I never heard that about
Yeah,
him. And now,
yeah.
because he was a huge influence in my life.
Oh yeah.
And I just, I saw him a certain way until you told me that story. And now I see Stephen King in his little cluttered office, because I know it is. And he's just like headbanging to Metallica, just like thrashing.
Right.
Yeah. But
Right.
interestingly, his band doesn't play heavy metal.
Right. That's right. Does he
Yeah.
still play in that?
Yeah.
Does he?
Did anybody
Yeah.
ever read his book on writing? I thought that was one of the
Yeah.
best.
Several
Yeah,
times, actually.
that's
I
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
did.
Oh, it's
Listened to
terrific.
it and read
I
it.
will
Yeah.
have to.
highly recommend it. Yeah, that's
Okay,
that's
well,
almost
It's a memoir, but it's really about writing.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I'm
that's
always
really,
referring back to it when I get stuck with something or I get down on something
Mhm.
when I'm writing.
yeah.
'Cause
Say
he
we
has such a
steal
good
that too.
perspective on it.
Yeah, yeah, he had some great
Excuse me.
thoughts and ideas. He really
Yeah,
did. It was
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a book too that I got a long time ago, and I just reread it, and it's called The Writer's Desk. And it's an older book, just amazing. So they have and John Updike did the intro, and they show him, but it's all these famous writers from Susan Sontag to Stephen King to, I mean, just going back to like the 50s, and it shows them at their desks, which to me is fascinating. I mean, Stephen King is like, you can't see him because there's so many books and chaos. And I mean, some are tidy, some aren't. Some sit at a little school desk, some have a giant table in an empty room. But they talk about their writing process and how the environment influences them. So I recommend that too. It's good. It's fun. And they talk
Somewhere
about,
here in my messy writing space is a book by Somerset Maugham about
oh,
writing.
Mhm.
So that's the oldest one that I've
oh,
found.
Wasn't it
So,
Mom that said I think it was there are 3 rules to great writing? Unfortunately, no one knows what they are.
Yeah.
yes. That's
Isn't
it.
that true?
Yeah.
No?
My favorite book on writing, as long as we're talking about that, though, is Elmore Leonard's. It's the 10
Yeah.
rules of writing. It's 10
Yeah.
pages long. And the
Oh,
first and the first rule is leave out the parts that the readers skip.
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, his books were so much dialogue too.
Yes,
Yeah,
they were. Yeah. Very lean.
another really great, well, I guess you would call it writing philosophy was from our friend Faulkner, and he said, and it was somebody asked about how he writes, and there all this florid kind of questioning, trying to sound, intelligent, expecting this, revelatory statement from him, and he said, well, a writer without a whiskey is like a chicken without its goddamn head. That's his philosophy. And,
Yeah.
it kind of shows.
Yes.
I'd love to be a writer like that, but I would like after one or two sips of whiskey, I am just
Yeah.
out, and so nothing would get accomplished.
You're on fire like Hemingway, but there's also the point of diminishing returns. As
Yeah.
I
Yes.
know, I enjoy a glass or two of wine when I write in the evenings, but after that, you're like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
then you
What
wake up.
was that thought?
Right, and then you wake up in the morning, and here's the funny thing: you wake up in the morning, and I'm sure you all do too. You reread what you did the night before, and there are sometimes I'm like, "Oh my God," and there are sometimes like, "Wow, that was brilliant." So I haven't stopped drinking because sometimes it makes me brilliant.
I'm curious. Well, I guess I'll share. My favorite was Vonnegut's tips on writing. I think he had 10, and one of them is don't waste time with suspense. Give the reader as much information as early as possible, so that if the world were to come to an end, the writing could be completed by any cockroaches that survive. Which I just kind of love that idea. And like so many of his short stories really are like, here's the year, here's the scenario, and
Yeah.
go. But I'm curious, like, let's thinking about inspiration. Like, have you ever found yourself watching a film or a series or television show, whatever, and thought, I want to try that in writing? And if so, what was it? Like, what was that thing that was maybe not a direct lift, but a trick or something on the screen that grabbed you for some reason?
Hmm.
That's
You mean something specific that they did in that particular show or movie?
Yeah, like if there was something that was, we talk about books that inspire us, right? Like, oh, I wanted to write like this author or whatever. But I was wondering, like, if you're sitting there in a theater and you saw something and you're like, wow, that worked great on the screen. I wonder if I can do that in a book.
Well,
well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Faye.
okay. I would say, well, one of my favorite films was L.A. Confidential. I thought that was a brilliant movie and screenplay with great and all those characters. I mean, Russell Crowe. Those were basically unknown actors when that show came out or that movie came out. Um, but when I was working on City of Stones, that was sort of a visual of the history because that takes place in 1950 Minneapolis when it was known as the most anti-Semitic city in the United States, and it was run by Kid Cann, the Jewish Syndicate, and Tommy Banks and the Irish mob. It was very corrupt, and that was sort of in the back of my mind when I was writing that book. It's about a murder, and so the fictional characters, detectives, interact with the actual characters that were running the city at that time. And to me, that has always uh, been a real strong visual and representation of sort of a historical kind of a film noir kind of a mystery. And that just always is in the back of my mind, especially when I was writing that book. So that wasn't a specific, you know, scene or something necessarily in the book. It was just the general overall flavor of that movie and the characters and how everybody interacted. And you mentioned Michael. You mentioned Vonnegut. I think it was Vonnegut that said something like every scene has to have conflict, and that's what drives the scene. And the conflict doesn't, have to be a murder or somebody beating somebody up or something. What
Right.
it can be is just somebody wants a glass of water and the other person doesn't want to give it to them. It's that
Or
conflict
or throws
between.
it in their face instead.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And that really, that's a piece when I think about Vonnegut that I keep in mind a lot. Every scene there has to be some sort of conflict. Otherwise, it's just information or
Yes.
whatever. And
Right. Yeah.
I
You know,
I'm trying to do
oh,
something like that right now. I'm trying to write a series of what I call noir
oh,
stories.
mhm,
And it came to me while watching the Maltese Falcon.
oh God, so good.
And I'm I would really like in words to create to re I don't know if I'll be successful. You all, if I ever get it done and you can read it, you'll have to tell me if I've been successful. But it's just to get that whole uh, dark, what made film noir was just the lighting and everything, and the settings were always so dark. And I'm
mhm,
trying to put that in words in some sort of way, and so that you get a sense that you have walked into a film noir when you read the story. So we'll see whether I succeed or not. But yeah,
James, that was totally what I was going to say. I have been obsessed my whole life with film noir, and my initial obsession, of course, was the cinematography. As
yes,
being visual people, it's that shadow and light, and I mean, just it was amazing. And then Truffaut, and you have the whole French movement, and Fellini, and I
right.
mean all the stuff, and it's just so impactful and visually. And then of course you get to these very lean stories, straightforward, like Raymond Chandler was, one of the first and one of the best.
Hmm.
I reread him often. And so I got interested in the interplay of the simplicity of the story, mirrored by the simplicity of the cinematography, but they both had so much impact. And
Yes,
that's exactly why once PJ had passed, and I did two more Monkey Wrench without her. I had 10 years of crazy observations and experiences I had in LA, which is a very dark place, but also a very light place. It's very noir, just all by itself, it's noir. And it was clamoring to come out. And that's when I started the Detective Margaret Nolan series, which is contemporary LA noir. And it was so fun and so amazing to write it. And a lot of things that I borrowed from in that were pure cinematography. I can't remember the name of it was a famous noir film. And there's a scene, I think it's the beginning, and a very young Shelley Winters is driving at night. It's very moody. She drives at night, and I think it was a Jaguar convertible. And it was dusty. She was in California, but then it started to rain. And they showed Shelley Winters right before she gets murdered in the car as these raindrops hit this dusty windshield. And then just watching the shadows play on the dust rivulets coming
yes.
down and the spotted windshield. And then it was, and so I incorporated a scene like that in the very first book. And so throughout the Margaret Nolan series, there is a lot of noir visual, and it's easier than you think, James, to create a noir atmosphere. Just sit there and watch those movies for 10 hours, and you're like sick of it. And it's like,
That's
I gotta
exactly
write this.
what I've been doing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is the classics from the noir period, which is roughly from the 1940s to the early 1960s, or maybe late 50s. But so many of those were inspired by the pulp fiction
Yes.
books of
Yep.
the
mhm,
1930s. You
Yeah.
know,
mhm,
Raymond
mhm.
Chandler, Dashiell Hammett,
Mm-hmm.
all of those, and Woolrich, and all those guys. they set this. It's just how things come around. You know,
Yeah,
they really set the standard that got brought in to film that now comes back and inspires a lot of books now. So yeah,
right. Well,
it's
we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And
yes,
they did as well. So when you look at the history of literature or of music or of anything, yes, there's an evolution, a progression, but it's, I wouldn't say stealing. It's like taking the best of something and refining it. It's kind of like when you have kids, you want them to do better than you, to have you know what I mean? It's just this
yes,
upward trajectory and it gets so refined, but there's always that core. I mean, you can go back and, I mean, you can read anything from, Canterbury Tales or, Dante or, Milton, and you see cores of storytelling and you can actually, follow this chronology in your mind.
An
I think you're
homage,
absolutely
perhaps,
right,
instead of
Tracy. I mean,
stealing.
we're all just kind of telling the same stories over and over again.
Right.
But what makes them special, and I think what makes them real for readers, is that it's our own particular takes
Yep.
on those stories. So Christopher is, we could all be writing the same kind of mystery,
Hmm.
the
And I
same,
think we
maybe the
do
same
very much.
plot structure or
Yeah.
something, but Christopher is going to have a different take on it. You'll have a different take on it. I'll have a different take on it. Rob will have a different take
Yeah.
on it. And it's, it can be, yeah, it's just the possibilities are endless in that situation.
And
When,
it's so fun. Go
when
ahead, Christopher.
no, I would just, this discussion really reminded me that in the books with Santana, I do a lot with darkness and light, where he
Yeah.
is, where he's standing, if he steps out of the darkness into light or vice versa. And so I use that a lot, which reminds me of the whole film noir and what we're talking about here, because I think that that very much comes from film and movies, which brings up another topic that I think about sometimes. Television is absolutely inundated with detective forensic. I mean, what, every night there's two or three on these channels, whatever. And yet the movie industry, rarely do you see a good detective murder mystery, unlike what we used to see
Right.
back, well, like James said, in all the film noir and all the Humphrey Bogart and all of that came from detective novels and books and Chandler stuff that they brought to the screen. And you just don't see that. But where you do see it now, which I think is actually a better venue, and I've had readers tell me that, oh, Santana, this should be a Netflix series or this should be an
Yeah.
Amazon series,
Yeah.
because really trying to put a good detective mystery or story into 120-minute, movie is pretty tough to do, and things get cut and lots of things get cut out because you just can't put it all in there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think LA Confidential was one of the few films that was able to really do
Hmm.
that.
That
And
and
and the book
Chinatown.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh well, his books, yeah,
they're they're lean, right? So it was a
yeah.
lot easier.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah,
But
exactly.
it is, I've shared this with Michael, and this is one of my favorite quotes. And it was Noel Coward, I believe, who said that. And somebody wanted him to adapt a book to, screen, film, play. And he said, adapting a book to a script is like taking a big, juicy steak and turning it into a bouillon cube.
Yeah,
Having adapted my own books,
Yep.
it's so
Yeah.
true. And
right.
that's when it gets tricky because you really have to strip it down, to the chassis. And
Hmm.
you have to
Right.
figure out what's important. And, you've got to show, you can't tell, you got to keep, there's no
Hmm.
narrative. And then, again, that visual comes into, mind. But Christopher, that was so interesting that you said it. It's right in front of my eyes. But you're right. there's like 5 million detectives,
Yeah.
on TV, and like, where are they in the movies?
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
they're done well in the movies, they're absolutely captivating.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And obviously people like them
They love
because,
them.
well, not just book sales, but of course, the Amazon Netflix series
Yeah,
and then, all these screenwriters or TV writers are doing them
right,
on
right.
television. And then you look at Hollywood, and when's the last really good detective mystery on the screen? I don't know. I'm at a loss.
I think you,
Chinatown.
Christopher, I think you named the last good one that
Yeah.
came.
Well,
I'm
that
not
was a
sure what
long
that
time ago.
relation was to Chinatown,
Oh,
but
Chinatown was
Oh,
terrific.
right.
Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
I think after that was L.A. Confidential, and in
Mhm.
my mind, that was the last real good one they had
And
done.
here's another observation. Every single really memorable, really good movie, especially like suspense, detective, everyone and the old Hollywood, before they lost their damn minds, knew the value of a good story. And they're
Hmm.
Yes.
all based on books.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
of
Well,
the
yeah. It's just, standing on the
Godfathers.
shoulders of greatness. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure, but I believe Chinatown was an original script, not
Screenplay it was
It was
Robert Towne.
original
Yeah, he
okay.
wrote
screenplay.
that. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's like one shining example of,
Hmm.
screenwriting. But,
It,
so
it
many
can be
basic
done.
books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can be done. So,
You got the right cast,
yeah,
Jack Nicholson.
yeah,
Yeah.
not bad,
Right.
not bad. I
Yeah.
fell in love with
And
her
and
for
and
a
Walter
decade.
Houston, he
Oh,
oh
yeah.
wow, what he did an
Christopher,
excellent
you
job.
said something about taking Santana out of Light and Dark. Made me think of Vermeer, and it made
Oh,
me think of how does art play any role in either your character development, like music, or in your stories, or is there anything borrowed from the art world that ends up in your books? That's a
Uh,
I
long
have,
shot, but
I think we all go ahead. We'll go,
yeah.
in order.
Well, Botero in Colombia, yeah, that's in that art is in when he's in Colombia. Um, I don't know specifically if I really dealt too much with the artwork, simply because I'm not real familiar with, I tend to stick with things I know or with, I'm fortunate to have good contacts. Tim Lynch, the former homicide commander in St. Paul's, a good friend. Lee Edwards from Minneapolis. So, and the forensic people I know, so I can get answers. But dealing with art itself, although I think you're talking more just, the visual and what
yeah,
happens, where
yeah,
what you see, and there certainly is in some scenes and in some of the books. As Tracy mentioned, the music that people hear, it's also art. What kind of art do they have in their homes or their
sure.
residence or their offices? And he goes in, and that can tell something about the character and what they like. So there is some of that in the books, but I don't know that it's necessarily a real concerted effort to do a lot with that. And that's basically because, I don't know. I'm not really a great art critic, so it's
Okay.
hard to say. A lot of it I don't understand when they say this just sold for $3 million or whatever. And you go, looks
Yeah,
like
you look at a
something
Yeah,
bank.
my
yeah,
5-year-old daughter could have done.
yeah.
It's
So,
funny. My father was an artist, so I grew up immersed in art and have
Mhm.
followed it ever since. So I'm trying to think of a book of mine that does not have art or an artist or something. It doesn't always impact the plot, but I think even more so than music, art does get integrated. There's a meaning behind it. There's a reason it's there other than, just, a background that's instructive about an environment or a character, something like
Mhm.
that. But, it's funny, we're all artists, right? but we all do everything. And, I bet you all do music, or, you painted or drew, or, you do graphic, whatever. I don't know. I no.
Not me. No, I can't even draw a straight line or anything like
Mm.
You
that's
don't
why
need
I
to if you're
write
an
because
artist.
I
Stick
can't do any
man,
other
stick
kind of
man.
art. I really can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I always admire somebody that is good with. We have my wife is from Colombia, and here in Arizona we have a couple of beautiful paintings that one of our artist friends did in Colombia and sent to us of the mountains and that sort of thing. We sent pictures, and then he did beautiful art with it. And we collect a lot of Native American art here because where we live is I think Tucson is a lot like the Twin Cities. It's a very artsy community. University of Arizona is here, and in Tubac, which is just south of us, it's a whole art center, an art community. So there's a lot of paintings, a lot of Native American art, and so on. The reservation is just not far from where we live. So yeah, so I do bring it to us, and even and now that I'm thinking more about it, as Santana walks into a place, lots of times there is some art, whether it's um, uh, Southwestern art or whatever, or Mexican or Colombian. Yeah, so I do use it, but I guess it's not a major piece in most of the books.
Mhm. Uh,
Well, James, you use art?
well, I'm thinking my initial response would have been no, but then I realized if you include architecture in that, then yes, it comes up quite a bit in what I write. In catechisms, the main murder, the murder that propels the story forward, takes place in a library and is just and in a very expensive, very fancy library at a university. Um, so that becomes integral. And then I don't know if you would call this out or not, but a Catholic crucifix,
Mhm.
the sort where it's not just the plain cross, but Christ is crucified on it. Um, that figures prominently in the story also.
That
Mhm.
is absolutely art. In
Yeah.
fact, religious art was
Mhm.
the first art.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you're expanding that more out to, yeah, there's a lot of that in Santana because he's a fallen away Catholic. He lost his belief, and all of that, and that's part and parcel of the books.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, any of that religious art, Shadow Falls, the
mhm.
most recent one before the new one comes out. Yeah, that deals a lot with because there's the black arts in there, the kind of occult, satanic kind of thing. So there's a lot of those pieces in there. So if we're expanding, the field of art and architecture, buildings and what something looks like, yeah, there's definitely that in the books for sure. Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about a world without religion, we would literally have no art. I mean, you look at the glorification of a deity first appeared in architecture, in iconography, in paintings, and it's the most amazing art that's ever been done. The music, sacred music, even going back to Gregorian chants. I
Hmm.
mean, listen to Handel's Messiah. I don't care if you believe or not or what you believe. You can't listen to the Messiah and not think that it's something divine. It's something so ethereal. It's otherworldly. And that was all, the passion of,
Hmm.
worship.
Right. And when you think about it, now that I think more about art, whether it's iconography or, architecture or even just paintings, the play it that art works with symbols at such a fundamental level.
Yeah.
And in how do we tell, symbolism becomes part of telling a good story, just you don't, you don't tell them the meaning of this
Mhm.
connection in this scene. You suggest it through what you put into the scene and what each element in the scene symbolizes.
Well, the
So,
whole idea
yeah,
of metaphor and simile,
Mhm.
it
exactly.
represents, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
And it,
oh,
it's so inspirational too, because I keep thinking, sometimes you find art or music influences your writing in ways that aren't literal at all. You can
Yeah.
never pinpoint them, but it's the way they make you feel. And I haven't thought of this in years, but I remember going to St. Paul's in Rome. And I mean, talk about a work of art. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just, it's so mind blowing. And, we're walking around and see all these famous pieces. And suddenly I came across Pieta, the famous Michelangelo, Mary and Child in the purest white marble. And we've all seen it since the time we were little. I mean, it's probably one of the most recognized pieces of art in the world. And I saw it, and it seemed to glow, and it was so tiny. I always thought it was huge, but I mean, it's not tiny, but it's small. It's like half, real life size. And I just looked at that and I burst into tears. I- I mean, I'm not Catholic, but it was so beautiful. And my friend was like, "What's wrong with you?" And it's like, you couldn't put it into words. And it was such a powerful emotion that I believe I was writing. It may have been The Guilty Dead. And that emotion was so vivid and it was heavy. It was like a weight. And I used that emotion and put it into the book. And it kind of lifted that weight. I mean, just seeing something so beautiful that moves you is almost like a burden, a good one, but a burden.
Yeah.
So that's the way that, music or art can just inspire the tone or whatever without ever mentioning it.
so,
So
oh,
it's
go ahead,
it's
Jane.
the indirect influence of different kinds of art, different kinds
Yeah.
of media that really begin to frame a good
Mhm.
story too.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, and now I just have to go quickly back to all these great old black and white, like, detective stories. Who who loves The Thin Man and Nick and Nora as much as I do?
Oh,
That was
well,
good.
they're definitely classics, yes.
Well,
Mhm.
and I think, part of aside from like the influence of Twain and Steinbeck, part of the reason there's a lot of humor, dark humor, in all my books and pages of my books are you look at Nick and Nora, they were hilarious. I mean, Nick was a disaster. I mean, it was so funny, but it was just great because I mean they're dealing with heavy stuff. But then, you've got this drunk walking around with a stake on his head and little ass is right, it's just so
Yeah.
good.
Well, and they were really the precursor. Those films from the 30s were really the
Yeah.
precursors, along with the books, the pulp fiction
Yeah. Yeah, as you would mention that
being written
before.
in the 30s, were really the precursor to noir.
Right,
They were.
exactly. I think Dashiell Hammett was,
Hmm.
one of the forefathers, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask a question that kind of flips the what we started with. Is now I'm wondering, what are things that work in fiction that don't work on the screen or that you haven't seen effectively conveyed? Like, books are this unique medium that allows us to do lots of stuff. And I think to Christopher's points earlier, Netflix and all the streaming platforms have started to tap into being able to kind of stretch that story out and allow you to really see inside the characters. But what still makes a book unique, and what haven't you seen translated well, if you can think of something?
Well, number one, did you know? I believe I have this right in the Maltese Falcon, the book. Um, Sam Spade's appearance is very different. Wouldn't, Humphrey Bogart would have been poorly cast if they were really trying to recreate uh, the Sam Spade that Hammett was trying to bring across. He's just got this very sharp V-shaped face.
Yes.
He's supposed to have blonde hair. He's supposed to be much taller, and
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 Humphrey Bogart.
yeah, and Humphrey Bogart just doesn't fit any of those. Now, I don't think that that was necessarily a bad choice uh, because of it. I think he does a very good job in The Maltese Falcon. But when you transfer to film, you lose a lot of that nuance that you can bring to a story
Mhm.
that the written word brings, right?
Mhm.
Oh,
And
And
that,
even
yeah.
the different
100%.
gestures that happen at key moments in a scene or something, um, they don't translate well into the film, which is why you always have this funny conversation goes on with people. Well, which was better, the book
Yeah,
or the
right.
movie?
Mhm.
You know,
The book is always better.
I think so. In very rare circumstances does it turn out to be the film. Yeah. The funniest thing was what with the film Jaws.
Oh,
Uh, Steven Spielberg hated the book. And
oh,
and
I read
I've
the book.
read Jaws, and while it's quite good, I would have to agree in that case.
Yeah.
I think just by accident, the film turned out to be much better than the book.
Well, and it was so simple, and the characters weren't that interesting, except for,
Right.
Queeg and the Dreyfus character. I can't remember his name.
Right. Yeah, you only had about three characters who were really all that interesting anyway. So, it
Yeah. And it
it
was a
didn't
simple story, right? It's like, okay, there's a monster, you
kill the
slay the
monster. Yeah.
monster.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know if this, Michael, is exactly what we're talking about, but my biggest complaint with particularly Hollywood is their insistence that the ending should be changed. That
Hmm.
it's rare, not always, certainly, but rare when they keep the plot of the book and follow the plot of the book. You go to the movie and you go, I go to see how it plays out like the book. And oftentimes it doesn't because they decide, well, you know what, that was a good book, but let's change the ending. Let's have somebody else be the killer or whatever it is. And that to me is a disservice for the author and the book and whatever. I'm going to
And the
make it better.
audience too.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to make it better or I'm going to make it different because no, if you enjoyed the book and you're going to go see the movie, you want to see how it plays out in a visual form on the screen. And oftentimes it's different. And I never could quite understand that idea that now again that I go back to the Bosch series, which I think was very well done, but Michael Connelly had a lot of input into
Yeah.
how that series played out. And for the most part, although Honey Chandler was killed off in the books, she didn't die in the series. But again, they held pretty close to what Connolly's vision was in the books. And I give the producers and whatnot that did that series credit for that because they followed along, and that I think that made it great. I think that really helped. But like I said, that's my biggest frustration with. I should give I get my buddy Chuck Logan a plug here. Chuck writes the Phil Broker series, and he sold Homefront to Sylvester Stallone, bought the screen rights, and he was going to play Phil Broker. And then over the years, he got older and it didn't get made. And finally, when it did, Jason Statham played the character who was good, and he was a good character. Winona Ryder, James Franco had a really good cast, but in the book the wife had PTSD, Broker's wife and the daughter. So it was the three of them. Stallone wrote, the wife wasn't even in the movie. They just wrote her right out. And it was filmed in the winter, or it was written in the Minnesota in the winter up north, and they filmed it in Louisiana in the summer. So,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
This is the
yeah,
same
because again, we talk about the visuals and the art, and it was cold and it was winter, and they were up in the north, and it was about drug running and cocaine and fentanyl and all the rest of it. And still Franco was the bad guy. But again, they just decided, well, we're filming in Louisiana, we'll write her out, and we're doing the summer. And
Well,
yeah.
you know, and
Uh,
some
the-
is for really since the big guys, Sam, Goldwyn and Meyer. I mean, these guys were writers. They were artists, and excuse me, they wanted they wanted real writers working. When those guys died off, seriously, I mean, what happened in Hollywood starting probably in the late 70s, early 80s, is that there was so much money, and suddenly the people making decisions probably never read a book. They are all Harvard,
Yeah.
MBAs, Nepo babies. They don't give a rat's butts about, they don't know story. And I have so many old friends who worked in the old days in Hollywood, and they're just talking about it's all driven by money, and that's why I see these stupid decisions being made. And often now it's a tail wagging the dog. It's not the story. The actors have huge input. If you want a big star and they want to set it in Louisiana because their mistress lives down there, well, guess what? It's going to change. Or if, you want to write more of a character, and you have a, tertiary character, right? And suddenly it's like you've got, Joe Blow. It's like, I'll play it, but I want triple the lines. And so then he's a main character. So it's not. I mean, Hollywood's wrecked.
Oh,
Well, it's
okay,
comic
so
book
that
now. It's all
yeah.
comic book stuff now.
That's an interesting point, Tracy, because I think one of the problems that film has is it can't deal well with a lot of characters.
Yeah.
It can't. It
You
just
don't have time in that 120.
they don't have the time.
No.
And I
Right.
think that even happens in the limited series where you can go deeper into an author's story. They start sloughing off
Yeah.
characters, right?
Mhm.
Which
Yeah.
is the nice thing in books. There's the extreme where you're dealing with War and Peace, where it's a little difficult to keep track of all the characters. But in most cases, you can have a lot of interesting characters in a book, and
And
readers
and
can still follow it as long as you're doing a good job of kind of intertwining the stories.
exactly.
It
And
works well.
is your answer. It's like there's a lot that movies can do. And the main thing, general consensus among all of us, I'm sure, is that the depth and the internal lives and the internal demons and conflicts are never going to show on screen, because you may have the greatest actor in the world, but if you have, a backstory 80 to 100,000 words and the character arc, it ain't gonna happen on screen. It's a limitation of the medium.
Mhm.
I
But the
am
interesting
sitting
thing
here
is,
thinking, excuse
oh,
me,
I'm
Jim.
sorry, Rob, go ahead.
I'm just sitting here thinking, or not thinking, sitting here with a smile on my face, because I think when Michael and I envisioned this podcast with the panel, it is exactly what has happened with this panel. You have been awesome. We've been at it for about an hour, and we try to keep them sort of to that length. But the fact
Well, the
is that
scripts you sent us worked out pretty well.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, the
Except
screenplay, it played
the
out.
screenplay was too short.
Yeah.
You got the right number
Michael
of
and I just
characters, three
we
characters.
just kind of sat back and listened, and we hope that's what the enjoyable part will be for everybody that will be watching this when it is actually goes live. So I want to thank you all for being with us and taking part of your Saturday morning to chat about a lot of things, some of which were even the topic of conversation that we started with.
Hey, right as we go off on tangent, I can't believe we're finished. I didn't get to The Shining and Stanley Kubrick's adaptation, or Pan's Labyrinth, or Jojo Rabbit. So yes,
There,
you have to have us back.
There's
'Cause
more
I'm
to say.
like,
Sure.
no, I have to go find a
there are
friend.
more podcasts, so we definitely will have you all back.